So resilience is the ability to bounce back from stress. I like to think of resilience as growth through struggle. Now, he mentioned I'm a psychologist, and I actually really work as a therapist to help teens and their families through struggle. That's what my job is. In particular, I work mostly with teens who struggle with depression or who have struggled with feeling suicidal. So I help people through some of the hardest struggles in their lives. And the thing that's continued to impress me is how some of these teens and families come through the hardest time so much stronger than they were before. They grow to this different place through this struggle. And so that's what I became interested in, is this understanding of resilience. How do people grow through struggle, and how can we understand more about that? So there's lots of struggles out there. I don't think I have to name them for you guys, right? What are some of the struggles? Love it. Okay. Awesome. I'm going to try to summarize what I heard. Y'all ready? Good. I heard a lot of great ones. I heard depression, school, friends, social media, Facebook, Instagram, being the first like, home, making sure your family is safe. These are good. Anxiety. All right. Thank you, guys. You've been very helpful. I think you have a sense of what struggle is. So here's the deal. We can't control that struggle comes into our world, right? And I would actually argue that we really don't want to. It's my hope that by continuing to study struggle and to share with you guys how to build resilience over time, that you guys can use that growth to build the kind of lives that you want to have through middle school and high school, college, jobs, and even beyond that. So we know that resilience is something called a dynamic process. So that means that it's ever-changing, right? So you go through a struggle, you deal with something at school, and while you're dealing with that, hopefully you come out a little bit stronger or more resilient than you were before. And then you use that resilience to go through the next struggle, and hopefully you become even more resilient than before. And it just keeps building and building and building. So psychologists love to study struggle, and I want to tell you a little bit of something about what we've learned. There's a psychologist named Dr. Mark Seary, and he and his team wanted to really understand the relationship between struggle or life adversity and life satisfaction. So he surveyed a large group of adults about all the different kinds of struggles they'd had over time in their life. And you guys could probably guess some of the results. So if you look at the place that it says high with that tall blue line, that was the group of adults that said they had had a lot of struggle in their life. They had had a lot of adversity, a lot of the kinds of things that you guys named, okay? And I think not that surprisingly, the ones that had the highest amounts of struggle really reported the lowest amount of life satisfaction. It's kind of like an overload at that point, right? It felt like too much. The group that was more interesting to me is that group that's next to the zero down there. You see how those are the people that report really very little struggle or stress, right? They had very little life adversity. Some people even had zero. Yet look at their satisfaction. It was just as low as the people that had that overload with a lot of struggle. Is that surprising to any of you guys? It was to me, because I think I had always sort of grown up with this belief that if I could just get rid of the stress in my life or get rid of the struggle, that I would be happier. Has anybody ever had that thought before? If I just weren't stressed, I'd be happy, right? But it doesn't really seem like that's the case. In fact, the people that were the happiest or had the most life satisfaction, way up here, were those people in the middle that sort of had an average amount of stress or an average amount of struggle. So it seems like maybe some struggle is actually good for us, right? That idea of resilience. We got to have a little struggle to be able to grow. Now, I wish I could tell you how to find that exact average medium amount of struggle so that you'll have the most satisfied life that you can have. And I'm going to use my career to try to study that. But for now, what I can tell you is that maybe it's useful for you to think about how you can build some positive struggle into your world. I'm going to tell you how I did that. So me and my friends started something a couple of years back. We call it the Women's Adventure Club. We go around town and we have a lot of adventures. I know that probably sounds weird, but it sounded really fun to us at the time. So what we do, the members take turns picking a different adventure. And the deal is that everybody has to be willing to try it. So I've done some pretty cool things. I learned how to make cheese, mozzarella, thank you. I also learned how to blow glass. Has anybody been glass blowing before? Yeah, I see a couple hands, cool. Yeah, so I ended up with this really beautiful bowl at home that I can remember that by. And then sometimes my friends would pick things that were sort of athletic. Has anybody heard of aerial silks? Yeah, okay, let me explain what it is for those that don't know. So aerial silks is this class where they have these really big, huge pieces of silk that hang down from the ceiling. They're very thick. Yeah, oh, I'm good, okay, good, I'm reminding you, good. Okay, and so what you do in the class is you learn how to sort of wrap yourself up in these silks. And it's like you're doing acrobatics in the air, right? If you've heard of Cirque du Soleil, they do that, or the singer Pink uses it in her concerts. Yeah. All right, I have to tell you guys, I am not the most athletic person historically. And I usually don't like to do things that I'm not very good at. Has anybody else ever felt that way before? Yeah, kind of that, I'm gonna stick with what I know, right? So I was not very excited about this particular adventure club. In fact, I don't think you guys are really understanding how not athletic I am. I'm gonna tell you a story about when I was in 7th grade. It is a really hard story for me, but I'm gonna share it anyway. When I was in 7th grade, we used to wear these really big barrettes in our hair, okay? So I grew up in the early 90s in a small town in Texas. And the barrettes, do y'all know what a hair barrette is? Like a clip that you put in your hair? Yeah. Okay, mine was big, and it was gold, and it had all these charms on it. It's kind of like a charm bracelet for your hair, I guess. Yeah, it was quite the look, right? So one day, I was in PE class in 7th grade, and we were practicing volleyball. And so it was my turn to bump the ball, right? You guys have done that. So I bumped it straight up, and notice that I said straight up. What happens when something goes straight up? Comes straight back down. Yeah. Right onto my barrette. And heart charms flew everywhere, like all over the gym. It was super embarrassing. You guys can laugh, it's okay. I laugh about it now. Thank you for humoring me. All right, you're good. So, one, I wouldn't have dealt with the laughter so good back then. But two, I was very thankful my best friend Autumn was there to help me pick up the pieces. So I think you guys now have a bit of a better sense of how I felt about going to this aerial silks class for my adventure club. I woke up that morning, I was super nervous. I thought about saying, oh my gosh, I'm sick. I thought about just not showing up and kind of leaving my friends hanging. I thought about just meeting them for a breakfast afterwards and asking how they did it. But then I caught myself kind of thinking these things, and I stopped, and I thought, no, you know what? I'm gonna do this. I started this adventure club. I need to see it through. My friends will be there. And maybe I won't be as bad at it as I thought. Maybe there's a chance I could try this, right? So I went, and I was awful. You guys can see here. Yeah. Notice my red face, right, and how red I am. Okay, so this is actually really hard to do. You have to be really strong. You have to have a lot of muscle strength, right? And I really kind of don't. And, you know, the instructor was so beautiful to watch. She would wrap herself up in the silks, and she would pose like this. And I wish that I looked like that, but I did not. And she would be like 5 feet off the ground, right? She would pull herself up really high. I would maybe be like 1 inch off the ground. But you know what? I did it. I went, I showed up, I sweated, I turned red in the face. At least I had on cute leggings that day, right? But I showed up and I tried. And later on, I was kind of thinking about that. Like, how did that positive struggle potentially help me? And I really looked back, and I think it was the way I thought about it that morning. Remember I told you I was trying to talk myself out of it, and then I said, well, wait, maybe there's a chance. Maybe I should try, right? So psychologists have actually studied this idea of thinking about struggle. There's a psychologist at Stanford named Carol Dweck who studies something called growth mindset. Growth mindset is the understanding that abilities and intelligence can change over time with opportunity and hard work. How many of you have ever had the thought, I am terrible at math and that's never going to change? Yeah. Okay, all of us has probably had a thought like that sometime, right? So that thought is an example of something called fixed mindset. This style of thinking that you don't really think things can change no matter what you do, and you feel kind of stuck, right? Has anybody ever had the thought, I'm really bad at math, but maybe if I practice and do something, I'll be able to change it a bit? Some people had that thought too? Okay, that's a pretty common thought as well. And that's a style of thinking called growth mindset. So that's that thinking that, you know what, I do have this ability right now, but if I work hard, if I keep at it, maybe something can change. So we actually do know that the way you think is something that's really important in growing through struggle. A couple of other things I want to make sure you guys know about resilience today. So one, we know that friendships and knowing who your people are is so important when it comes to resilience. By your people, I mean your family, the ones you were born into and the one you make over time, your friends, your teachers, the people in your world that you can really depend on. One, we know you have to spend time with them. You have to get to know them. You have to sometimes ask them for help because there's always someone that can help. And all struggle is going to be easier if you have your people helping you through it, whether it's struggle you can't control or positive struggle that you create. Two, we know that one of the ways that you can really grow through struggle is by reflecting back on it, thinking back on what happened. In my example with my Aerial Silks Class Adventure Club, I really had to think back on that. Why was that so hard for me? Why did I make that such a big deal, right? That was meant to be fun. But thinking about how it made you feel, what it made you think, how you dealt with it, what you did, how you coped, and then what worked for you that you can take as a lesson going forward. So for me that day, I told you guys already, I felt pretty nervous, right? I also felt a little ashamed. It was kind of embarrassing to be there at first and be so terrible at something, and I feel pretty proud of myself that I'm willing to share this picture with you guys now. I also, though, felt this sense of like joy and accomplishment at really being able to be there with my friends and do something, learn something different, use my body in a different way from the ways I normally do. So what I learned from myself that day that really helped make this one of those resilience-building activities is that I learned that if I'm there with friends and I'm doing something, even if it's a struggle, leaning on my friends, laughing with them, asking for support, rather than comparing myself to them and feeling ashamed, works for me. The other thing that can help you build resilience is really learning to look ahead. I like to think of struggle as being kind of like a pothole in the road, right? Potholes are temporary. You are going to move past them in some way. Even if the road's closed, there's always a detour. And so learning how to kind of look ahead and see if you see a struggle coming, and look at how you're thinking about it. Look at maybe what you can do about that struggle, right? Sometimes you can just drive around the pothole of struggle. Sometimes maybe you gotta lay a board down or you gotta build a bridge to drive over it. Sometimes you might decide it's better to just turn down a different road and get there another way. And sometimes you're gonna miss seeing it ahead and you're gonna fall straight into it. But there's some value in that too. We know that if you fall in a pothole of struggle, you can learn some things as you try to pull yourself out. Maybe you build a ladder, maybe you stand on a box. That's a really deep pothole. Or maybe you ask your people, you ask some of your friends, some of your support to help you out, and you reach up that hand. So learning to look ahead to the potholes, reflecting back in your rearview mirror on what you learned from that opportunity, again, really focusing on what you felt, what you did, how you dealt with it, and how you can use that information in the future. And then the last thing I will say about resilience is that I really encourage you to build a bit of positive struggle into your world. Try to figure out if there's some new things you can try that can really kind of stretch you. And then practice that reflecting back and planning ahead around that so that you can really hone those skills that can make you more resilient over time. It's my hope for you that as you learn to grow through struggle, you're able to build the kind of life that you want to have. At UT Southwestern, where I work, we continue to study resilience. So we actually have a study called Resilience in Adolescent Development, or RAD for short. And in this study, we are asking people like you, ages 10 to 24, to partner with us for 10 years. And during that 10 years, we're gonna do a couple of important things. One, we're gonna ask people how they deal with struggle. We're gonna ask about the kinds of struggle that they come up with in the 10 years, both the more negative, unexpected struggle and some of the positive struggle. We're gonna ask how they think about it, and we're actually gonna learn what happens in their brain. Remember I told you that idea of growth mindset, right? That the brain is changeable, moldable. We're gonna look at the brain through things like MRI, which is brain scans, and EEG, which looks at your brain waves, to try to understand what resilience actually does to the brain. The thing I'm the most excited about with that program is that we're then gonna take what we learn and we're giving it back to you guys. So we are actually already partnering with a lot of local schools to do a program called Youth Aware of Mental Health, which is a program done in the classroom that really is hoping to get you guys to talk a bit more about struggle, about the ways you deal with struggle and grow through struggle, and to figure out how you guys can support each other, so how you can be there for one another to get through. So obviously you can't control all the stress and struggle in your world, but it's my hope today that I left you just a little bit more curious about how you can take that struggle and really grow and really kind of push yourself and become more resilient over time. And maybe you can even start your own adventure club too. Thank you. Thank you.